Hi guys, welcome back to My Steps to Sobriety, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Today I've got Marie Alessi with me. Marie is touching upon something that we are pushing away from us more and more and more in modern society, and that is indeed death and loss and grieving afterwards. There was a time when death was part of life, and we were there when people died. They often died at home, and there was a certain kind of part and parcel of that. Nowadays, that is all gone. We do no longer do home kills. We are buying the meat in the pack and save or in any kind of groceries. It's an artificial life that we're often living, and as such, when death knocks on the door in our families, we're often so unprepared. And today I want to actually change that. I want to actually talk about loss and grief and how it affects us, and some of the myths and some of the crap that is around that topic. And for that, Marie, I'm so grateful that you have come onto my show.
Thank you so much for having me, Stefan. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really looking forward to busting some myths around grief and sharing a few other ways to deal with it.
And it's weird. As I said, it is our society has changed. We are no longer this kind of more extended family where there are connections and one experiences the loss within the family. But, you know, our society has changed, certainly in the Western world. That might not apply to all our listeners. But have you, prior to you losing your husband, have you had been exposed to grief? Have you had been exposed to, was death part of your family? Or was that something that happened to people in a hospital?
No, unfortunately, it was something part of my family quite early on. I think the earliest death in our family that I remember, I was around 5 years old, maybe, when my grandfather died, but it was sort of on the sidelines. You know, I wasn't really deeply affected by it because I was so little. I was 12 when my grandmother died, and she died in our house. My family looked after her for the past 18 months before she passed. I was 20 when my dad passed away. That was the first death that has truly affected me really deeply. And because it was at an age where you don't expect it, my dad was only 46 and died of cancer. And after he had survived the first treatment round, I honestly thought that he would survive the second one, and he didn't. So that really threw me for quite some time. For at least over a year, I was completely off path. I had no idea how to deal with it. I was not taught how to grieve properly and how to deal with it. And then, I lost a very close friend in his early 30s. And then my husband when he was 45. So it was very similar age to my dad, completely different story. My husband had a brain aneurysm, so there was no pre-warning. There was no history of cancer like with my dad. Rob went on a business trip and never came home. So, it was not my first exposure. And just very recently, actually 4 weeks ago, my husband's dad passed away, and that was the very first time that I was actually present when somebody took his last breath, and I was there to hold him and to be with the entire family. We all came together, and that I thought was so beautiful. And so many cultures actually do that. They come together as a family. They hold that person in love while he or she is passing. And we had that chance to do that. It was my first chance ever to actually say goodbye to somebody, and I took that chance because I never had that before. So I felt very blessed to be there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And there is so much to be said about that, because that makes it part of life to be there and to have this privilege.
Yes, absolutely. I call it the same.
As an anesthetist, I would have been covering so many times the intensive care unit. And it is clear that sometimes patients will not make it out of there.
Yeah.
And I've seen some horrific, lonely deaths. And I've seen, especially here in New Zealand, where there are larger families, specifically the Pacific Islanders and the Maori, there can be some beautiful spiritual experiences that really celebrate the person's life. And are creating a natural moving on to whatever there
Yeah.
is after life.
Isn't that
So
beautiful? Yeah.
indeed, right.
Yeah.
And that is beautiful to see when it happens. But I
Mm,
think very
I
few
agree.
people will actually get the opportunity to experience that, because
Mm,
certainly if I look at my family, I mean, my family was dysfunctional and
mm,
broken, and we were all
mm.
bloody broken. And
Yeah.
so it is no great role models, no much love lost, and probably quite a bit of mental health and
Mm,
personality disorders thrown in. So
yeah.
you can't always expect the most beautiful end of a life when the whole life
Mm,
was shit. So, but the way I hear you talking about your family, there's a lot of respect, and there's a lot of
yeah. That's
kindness.
my husband's family, I have to say, because when you said your family is dysfunctional, I thought, sounds very familiar to my family. So I'm talking about my husband's family here. But
Right.
yeah, I have healed a lot. My relationship with my mom, completely different podcast probably, but it came out of Rob's passing when I healed my relationship with my mom. And I'm happy to share a bit more about that, because I actually do want to share this now quickly, if that's okay.
Of course, please.
One thing, when you said, spiritual journeys and spiritual connections, everybody's got such different spiritual beliefs to how you live your life, where you come from, where you go after you pass. And I completely respect that. My own deeply spiritual belief is that Rob and I had a soul contract, and that this was part of it. And I came to this realization very shortly after Rob died. It was nothing that I had thought about before, or that I had completely and fully understood before, at least not on a conscious level, on a soul level, probably. And I really came to that conclusion for me, that I thought, this is part of our journey. We have chosen that on a soul level. And again, everybody has got different beliefs. This is my belief, and I'm not trying to force it upon anyone. Yet when I shared that with a friend of mine before I was open to actually talk about it on a podcast as well, now it's something so normal to me. She said to me, "You really need to read this book, Sacred Contracts by Caroline Myss." And I said, okay. So I started with one chapter, and it really got to me, because I realized the reason why I had to read this book was not because of Rob and I had already understood that, why all of that happened, but it was because of my mom. I recognized while reading this book the soul contract that I had with my mom, and it gave me so much peace that everything I had tried to fix between the two of us ever since my dad passed away, we had a really not so good relationship. So I'm talking like 30 years of, not great relationship with mom was completely healed just by reading this book, and just by understanding that this was our soul contract. And now, yeah, we're in a really good space. So it's incredible. I truly feel that once you choose healing, we'll talk about that later as well. Healing is a choice. Once you choose that path, that you'll always meet the right people, the right books, the right nudges, whatever. So once you open your heart to it, they come from everywhere.
I absolutely love it, and I absolutely
Mm,
agree with that, in the
yeah.
sense that the body or the universe or whatever is out there,
Mm,
if you believe in Jesus or in Allah, whoever
yeah.
maybe pulls the threads of this
Mm,
funny puppet life,
yeah.
uh, you once you open yourself, the healing can begin, and often it
Mm,
begins in areas that you would have never thought about.
yes.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
and that is the beautiful thing. That is what you discovered with the
Mm,
relationship with your mom. And
mm,
it might sound like weird to the listeners, but I've experienced similar things as part of my recovery, as part of my healing.
mm,
I must
mm,
say that that relationships changed with people. Some
mhm.
fell away completely, and
Oh,
not just
yeah.
because they were no longer drinking partners, but just
Yeah.
because I changed,
Mhm.
and I became a different man as part of my healing,
Of
and as
course.
part
Yeah.
of my core beliefs maybe changing,
Mm,
and me
yeah.
paying attention to different things in my life. And that
Yeah.
is, I
And it's
think,
part of your different choices as well. I love
exactly.
that. Mm,
And it's choice. And let's come back to
yeah.
you there, because when I'm actually quite stunned, because you had been exposed to a number of deaths. And when I
Mhm.
go back in my life, there were a number of deaths too, but often, well, all of the time, I was never there. I was either in a different country or in a different town. And then suddenly you get a phone call, your dad is dead. Oh, okay. That's about it. I was never part of it. I had never seen death in my own family. I've seen it plenty of times in my work, but that's different.
Yeah, very different. Yeah,
isn't it?
You're detached. Yeah,
exactly. But you were not detached. Was that something that your parents tried to achieve? Was that actually something done purposefully to you?
Absolutely not. No, it was just how it happened in our lives.
Right.
You know, there was nothing that we had purposefully like put on our path, you know, to build resilience or whatever the reason could be for that. It just really happened. Yeah.
Because there was a generation when those kind of things were happening in the hospital, and kids should never be exposed to that.
Yeah.
So therefore, it was that kind of
according to who?
Yeah, well, touché. Certainly, certainly in Germany, and certainly in my family, there was this kind of, nah, you don't need to see that kind of a belief, whatever this was. And I find that so wrong. I find that, especially as a doctor, birth and anything in between and death, that is all one journey.
I've seen it all.
I've seen it all, and I try to instill that in my children. That all that is normal. You can't just only take the sweet stuff in the between and the start and the end. Nah, that's anything that has diapers, we forget. No.
I remember my mom actually called us down when my grandmother died and said, you know, she looks so peaceful. Do you want to see her? And I walked in and I thought, yeah, she really did look so peaceful. And with my dad, we went to hospital after he passed, and I remember seeing him, and I remember, you know, you being hospital staff, you might be so able to understand and relate to what I'm saying here now. And I know it might sound confronting, so a bit of a disclaimer for those listening, but when we came to hospital, my dad was still warm because it had only been an hour since he passed. And I remember holding his hand, and it really felt like he was holding my hand, which obviously, you know, he had passed. But I actually pulled a sheet over him because I didn't want a hospital staff to do that as their part of duty. It was so hard for me to do that because it was such a final act. And yet I knew how important it was that I did it and not hospital staff. And fast forward, you know, all these years later, when Rob passed, we went to the mortuary together, my boys and I. They were 10 and 8. And I gave them the choice. I explained exactly what it would be like because I had experienced it. So I knew what to look out for. And I also knew that this time, and again, very confronting, the body would be cold because it was 2 days before we could see him. Rob was on the other side of Australia. We had to fly from Sydney to Perth 5 hours. And by the time we got there, the mortuary was closed. And then we had to wait for another day. So 2 days had passed before we could see him. And I had to prepare them for that. I gave them the choice. There was no question that I would take them to Perth with me because I thought their dad had just flown to Perth and didn't come home. Imagine I'm now flying to Perth. I can't do that to them.
Of course.
They'll have to come with me.
Of course.
But I gave them the choice whether they wanted to come into the mortuary or not, and both wanted to. And I'm so glad they did because I thought it was really important for them to have that closure, to see him. And it was an incredibly bonding and beautiful and sacred moment to be there, the 4 of us together for the last time. So I thought,
beautiful. And no doubt you are leaving a legacy there, and you're bringing closure to something. But what strikes me with both of these occurrences is that you chose to take action. You took back some of the control. And
absolutely,
you were not the victim. You were not paralyzed in your grief and in your fear, but you actually analyzed the situation on a subconscious level and made a decision and acted. And that is beautiful to hear.
Yeah, thank you for honoring that. I know that after my dad passed, I fully slipped into victimhood. Really did for about 10 years. And that's when I recognized it. I did not recognize it for a really long time. I was really stuck in a massive poor me state for over a year after Dad passed, and then I was still in victimhood for a long time because that's my mother line, that's my family background. I shouldn't just call it on my mother line, that's my family background. They knew how to play victimhood role. They really knew that really well. So I learned it really well. I was like champion at it. And then when I recognized it, I really disliked it deeply, and I did something about it. I changed my state around that. I went into therapy. I worked on myself because I did not like the way I looked at life. So I changed it. But again, it's a choice, you know. Healing is a choice.
That's interesting. What changed after 10 years?
What changed was, first of all, I moved to Australia. I moved to Australia when I was about 31, I think. Yeah. And through moving to Australia, I think that was my first really big choice to say yes to life, to say yes to what I wanted, to my absolute dream. I stepped forward into, this is my dream. This is where I want to live. This is where I want to be. And I think with that, there was also that change of, well, who do I want to be? Because it was a completely fresh start. And I looked at everything that I liked and didn't like about me. It wasn't a conscious process back then. But then when I realized what I was doing, I very consciously worked on it. So first it started off as a, subconscious, unconscious process. And then it turned into full on choice. This is what I love. This is who and 10 months after I moved to Australia, I met Rob. I met my husband. I was like, this was such a soul meant to be, and another 10 months later, we were married. If anybody would have told me that, you'll move to the other side of the world, meet your, future husband and get married 10 months later. I'm like, no way, Jose, not me.
Exactly.
Like if he's Mr. Right, he'll still be Mr. Right in 2 to 5 years, whatever, but Rob proposed 5 months after we met. And I was like, of course.
Excellent.
It was no doubt. So, yeah.
Excellent. You just don't know what life brings, and sometimes
I hope you're going to tune in some violins in that part when I tell the story.
Priceless. Priceless. No, it is what it is. And that's interesting. So again, you started taking control of a situation, but it is, I love to hear that you admit to this pity party, and I lived in that. I wallowed in that so much, and
I was great at it.
Anger and resentment were my predominant emotions in response what they did to me, what this life did to me.
Exactly.
And it took me to the mid-40s when I was in rehab, when I got challenged on that. For me suddenly to realize, hang on, maybe there is something where I have contributed to some of the mess that I was in. So taking ownership of some of my decisions.
Huge,
and then the question of, okay, well, who do you want to be when you grow up? And that is something that I have never been asked on that level. And now I was challenged with it. So you made that choice by moving to Australia. So, and fair call. Once you've made one big choice, it's much easier to do another big choice and another big choice.
I didn't even realize how big it was. People always said, that is huge. You moved to Australia, started a new life at the age of 31. And I was like, I just followed my dream. I just went where I wanted to be. I didn't realize how big it was till I was here and had to deal with visa situations and all of that. So anyway.
But that's only 5% of the population are those kind of go-getters who actually follow their dream. So therefore, well, exactly, touche. But and again, that is either if you're forced into that position or you choose that position, you're suddenly taking action, and therefore it makes it a little bit easier the next time again to take action.
Yeah,
having said that,
like a muscle.
Having said that, let's come back to the loss, because ultimately here you were living life to the fullest. You met Mr. Right. Children came along, 2 of them. How was...
And all by choice.
All by choice. There you go. And by taking action. Yep. I know.
Oh, yes. Different podcast.
Different podcast. That's right. Yes. See, social distancing. You were never good in that, were you?
That would have not worked. No, not at all.
Stop it. Come on, this is a serious podcast. No, so you were living your life. What were you doing? What was your profession?
I actually worked, so when I first met Rob, I worked in advertising. And then when we had kids, I chose to leave the advertising industry because I've never seen anybody combine family and career successfully. I was already quite advanced in my career at that stage, and I didn't want to progress any further. I knew I would leave. And I had the plan to stay at home for about 3 to 4 years till the kids are old enough to go to preschool. We had it all mapped out. We wanted 2 kids. We wanted to wait till they're old enough for preschool, and then I would go back into the workforce. Then the plan was scrambled a little bit because we decided to buy the house before and not when I go back to the workforce. And so I went back a little bit earlier than I had planned, so about after 3 years. So, yeah, the kids were 3 and 1. And I literally stumbled into the self-development world. I applied for a job where they were looking for somebody in sales. I was so not passionate about it, but I just wanted something to add to the budget, you know. And when they said, look, that's what we do. Come to a retreat weekend, you know, all expenses paid for. We just want you to know what we do. And if you like it, we really like your CV, then welcome on board. And that was a self-development workshop. And I remember sitting in there going like, I want to do that. I don't want to do sales for you. I want to do that. This is incredible. And that was my first real, tipping into the self-development world that weekend. And I said no to the sales job and I signed up to become a coach. And I just loved it. And then they offered me a job as a coach and I said no again. And I went on and started my own business. And I did that for about 7 years. So my main focus was always mindset and sort of relationship connections. But it was business related, which was really quite an interesting niche. So I worked on the personal growth to achieve business growth with the people that came to me. And yeah, that's what I was doing when Rob went on a business trip and never came home. And then when he didn't come home, I'd closed that business down. I did it for over 7 years. And looking back now, Stefan, I know that without that, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing now because it gave me that background in mindset and it gave me so many tools that I was now really put to the test to use on myself, you know, the really shifting my perspective, because every healing that you do has got an element of shifting your perspective.
I was about to ask, I mean, there were not many self-help books that I not read over my years. I was excellent in picking up nuances in others. I could see addiction a mile away. Depression, the moment you walk through the door, I can tell you.
Especially when you've experienced it yourself. You can see it in people.
No. I was other way around. I could see it in everyone else. I couldn't see it in myself. I couldn't see it in my wife. I couldn't see it in me. I was complete denial and complete everything. So, and whilst I was very good in helping others, I was lousy in helping myself. So were you focused on others, or were you actually from the word go when you started that weekend and then the journey that followed, were you actually putting your money where your mouth is, or were you always focusing on others?
I can so honestly answer that, and that's exactly what I meant when you said, "Oh, you didn't see it in yourself," but that's exactly what I mean. When you have experienced yourself, you see it in others. You don't put it. That's a reflection part, you know.
Gotcha.
So we are really, really good in seeing the reflection of everything we have experienced, and sometimes that's the exact path that then leads us to our own. That then leads us to discover our own, because it's easier to see in others first, and it's exactly the same. So. Absolutely was I focused more on others first. I was so, like in particular with the first one, with the first business in coaching. And then when Rob passed, I had no idea what that would turn into, you know. About 5 months after Rob died, I shared our story in a book. I just wanted to share, leave a love legacy for Rob, and also maybe one day for the boys to read it. And my biggest wish was that it would, on the way, sort of, you know, leave hope and a different direction or perspective for others that would read it. What I didn't expect was that the book not only became an Amazon #1 bestseller, but it actually ranked in the top 100 of Australia. And I was like, what? You know, I really did not expect that. It was our story. It was not, it was not my intention to that this would become so big. And after the book came out, I actually traveled around the world with the boys for 2 months. I took them on a huge trip. I wanted to create new and happy memories and just take them away from all these first milestones with our dad. And when I was in Vienna, where I'm originally from, all of a sudden I had this epiphany. I'm like, I've got something the world needs. The world needs that hope. The world needs that shift in perspective. And I there and then decided that I needed to do something more with that. I had no idea what yet, but I knew I would start some sort of group, some sort of movement, and everything just unfolded from there. It was literally like the path presented itself. And this is a long-winded way to come back to your original question. Everything that I did in this group when I started a movement, I chose to use my background in mindset coaching, combine it with my own personal experience, and I started creating healing journeys for people. So everything that I felt, I did for others. But every time I helped others, it became this upward spiral out of grief, which was incredible. And yeah, it just really unfolded. It literally unfolded in front of me, and it was literally somebody had just created this path for me, and all I had to do was walk it, and own it.
And that is the post-traumatic growth. That is such a beautiful
love that.
transformation.
Love it. Yeah,
indeed, because we are going into this trauma, and you're initially hit over the head, and you think, "What the hell?" And you have no idea where that leads you.
Yeah,
and there are so many traps that follow thereafter, because if you have never learned to deal with your negative emotions, then something like that can completely derail you.
Oh yeah.
I mean, my fallback plan would have been to get pissed, and that's for breakfast. So was there a temptation for you to escape reality?
Absolutely, 100%. And I remember the night we all came together, like after I had to share the news with the boys, I drove over to Rob's parents' place because I thought this is no news that I want to deliver over the phone. And then everybody started coming over, the siblings and even neighbors, other family members. And I remember sitting there watching them. And this is literally, I honestly, I need to tread carefully here. This is with no judgment, but they all started, having their glasses of wine and all. And I sat there and I thought, I need to keep my head straight right now. I need to stay so present. I need to be there for the boys. And I had this intense realization that all they have now is me. And I knew there and then that I had to fully step up and own it. And it was, I shouldn't even say I have to or had to, I chose to. And that's the huge difference. I chose to fully step into that and own it. And my escape from grief, and this is where the massive difference happened, was happiness. I chose to focus on happiness. I chose to do anything and everything in my mind that I had that I could do to create the happiest life possible for the boys, because that is a promise that Rob and I made to each other when we thought it was theory, when we thought, what would you do if? We had these what if conversations a couple of times, but they were theory. And then all of a sudden they were reality. And I'm like, that's what we promised to each other. I said, if anything ever happens to me, you have to promise me to take the boys and create the happiest life ever possible. And I knew that's what I had to do. And it was not easy. It was not flick the switch and the next day I was happy. It became my North Star for everything I did. Everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you guys had thought about it, and therefore, and that's again, how uncommon is that? Maybe somewhere along the line you have a little discussion, but never a meaningful discussion, or rarely a meaningful discussion. To actually hear that again, maybe that made you a little bit more prepared, maybe a bit more prepared for life, savvy, streetwise. whatever the words you choose, you had thought about it, and therefore that gave you actually a head start, so to speak.
Yeah.
And of course, you're a mama bear. Okay, and now you have got the cubs.
Yeah.
Don't stand between mama bear and the cubs. Doesn't work. Exactly right. So there is that coming out of you. So there are a lot of things happening here at the same time that maybe a man has difficulty understanding. And depends on your core beliefs and your the way you were brought up. If someone was brought up like a man is a man, the only two emotions you're allowed is thirst and
boys
hunger.
don't cry.
Yeah, that's right. All that shit. Okay, bullshit. But if you have got that core belief and you really subscribe to that, you don't go out there to seek help. Whilst you were able, you already had taken the journey to seek help. The seeking help and sharing your story was part of what you wanted your clients to do. Is part of them. You saw the power of their growth after trauma. So therefore it was much easier for you to take similar steps. So you had an advantage there. But then again, sometimes life is beautiful this way, because here you were armed already with a set of skills that others don't have.
You know, Stefan, sometimes when I look back, I honestly think that everything that happened in my life was a preparation for what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Like, even, you know, looking back, my grandmother, like my dad, all these things that I was dealt, and how differently I dealt with it back then and how I would deal with it now. It was all a preparation. It was all I think there was a lot of learning how not to do it. And then I realized, I often, in my work now, I often talk about the hidden gifts in adversity. There are always hidden gifts in every adversity.
Absolutely.
It's just a matter of, you know, are you open to seeing them, and are you open to receiving them? Absolutely. This is the work I do. I help people to allow them in. And one of the biggest gifts in my dad's adversity was that living life with so much more intention. And really being in this, sharing my emotions, telling Rob how much I loved him. And I told him every single day, not out of fear that one day I couldn't tell him, but out of, well, if I don't tell you, I'm going to burst, because I love you so much, you need to hear it. And he was the same. And we were very in tune and very connected, so much so that I actually rang the hotel when it happened. I said to them, can you please send somebody up to my husband's room? I have the feeling something happened to him, and can you please check in a shower? I had this split second of a vision of him collapsing in a shower, and I didn't want to buy into it, but we were so connected. And then they sent somebody to the room, and that's where they found him. They found him in a shower. He had a brain aneurysm in the shower and died there. Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of connection and very in tune. And I don't take any of that for granted ever. It's just an amazing gift, an amazing blessing.
And a legacy that drives you forward, and that you have harnessed. You have harnessed that power. You have harnessed that energy, and are now creating good out of it. And what better way can there be to make sense out of grief, out of loss, out of sadness, than actually to kick ass and make sure that maybe if those things happen to others, that you can arm them with the skills that helped you, the insights that you had, the lessons you had to learn the hard way. That's what not everyone needs to go through the same crap in the same traumatic way, but maybe there's is just that bit of an easier path ahead if with people like you by their side. But of course, no one ever thinks about that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no one ever thinks about that. No one ever listens to a podcast like that unless you suddenly have experienced a loss. That is the typical scenario. No one goes out there and says, cool, which life skill should I learn today? Oh, grief. That's right. We haven't touched upon that. Let's do a weekend of grief, shall we?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Although it is, these are things that it just comes to my mind. Here I am, big mouth, saying, oh, really, all these life skills. And my book, My Steps to Sobriety, here on the back is all these life skills there, where I talk about the difficult things. Have I actually talked to my boys about grief? Have I actually spoken with them honestly about it? No, I haven't. So I've just had to look in the mirror here myself. It is hard to have these difficult discussions, and it's hard to do that when
I'd like to. I'm sorry,
Ladies
I didn't
first.
want to interrupt you. I'd like to actually shift everyone's perspective around here, around this topic here. I do not think, and that might come to a surprise with the work that I do, but I do not think that it's so important to talk to your kids about grief now, because there's still time when adversity hits you to do it then. What I do think is more important is to talk about the truth in life, that it is possible that people go early, and that it is more important to talk about what you actually want to do with your life. Who do you want to become? What do you want to do? And not, what happens if I don't want to raise my kids in fear, that something could happen. And here's the point, because we have experienced it. They have experienced what it's like to lose a parent. So naturally, I remember for the first couple of months when I finally came to senses, and I'm saying that because the first few months I was literally in functioning mode. I was just, okay, next step, next step, next step. How can I make them happy? How can I protect them? I fully stepped into protector role. I was complete mama bear. I was watching them like a hawk and whatever other animals you can throw in there. I was literally just in protector mode the entire time. And when I came to these senses where life sort of became a bit more choosing and being in the moment and really coming to more into consciousness again, I had this thought, how on earth will I talk to my boys about what if something happens to me? I need them to know, yet I don't want them to be scared. And then one day Flynn rocks up. That's my older one. He was 11. So it was about maybe almost a year after Rob died. I don't know why, but May just came up. So it must have been 11 months after Rob passed. And he said to me, or was it my little one? I can't remember now, but we were the three of us together and we had this conversation. So what would happen if? And I said, you know what, I'm actually really glad that you asked me this, because I did want to talk to you about this, but I didn't want you to be scared. Oh my God, now something could happen to mom. I said, look, we all know more than anyone that we have no guarantee. So I did talk to them about this. The option is there. It could potentially happen. And I said, but you know what? I always had the feeling that I would have a really long life. I always thought that I would turn 93. And Jed, my little one, looks at me like, why 93? I said, I don't know. I was like, well, 3 times 3 is 9, 93, it sounds like a cool age. But it's like, can you try to make it to 100, Mom? And I said, sure, I'll try to make it to 100. And so we had this really sort of light, beautiful discussion around it. And then something happened that really rocked me to my core. Flynn looks at me and says, and as I said, he was 11 at the time. He said, Mum, I need to tell you something. I don't know how to say it. And I said, it's okay, Flynn, just say it. We're talking about really deep topics here. So, and he said, I have to say our lives have sort of gotten better since Dad passed, and my heart sunk. I'm like, what? And I didn't say anything. I'm just, just smile and wave on the outside and breathing in while he's talking. And he said, it's not because he passed, it's because of what you made of it. And I was like, jaw drops to the floor. And I was like, wow. And I said, thank you so much for saying that, because that was the very moment where I received this most beautiful proof from my 11-year-old son that I was on the right path, despite so many people going like, what is she doing? Is she even grieving her husband properly? Or is she still in shock or in denial or all that stuff, And I'm like, yeah, anyway.
Wow.
Incredible moment.
Oh, I'm so pleased that you had that experience, because that living intentionally that is coming out of being in the darkness,
Yeah.
and understanding that it is a privilege to take or to make choices.
Yeah.
And no longer taking life for granted. And I think that is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I took my young man to a business seminar, business weekend, real estate investment, and things like that. And we had to do an exercise. And there's sort of the kind of whole number of squares, 10 across and then 100 down. And then they said, well, you know, in our society here, the average age of men dying is 83. So cut out the last line and then 7 there. So now take your pencil and take your age, cross all those lines out. And these are the years that you've got left. And I did that. And I looked at a few squares there and I thought, oh my God. And I literally, I must have sunk there. And my son looked at me, took that whole thing from me and started drawing new squares. Who says that 83 is the number? And he did more squares there.
Oh my God, I love
Take
him.
it back. And that
How old is your son?
That is so beautiful when children accept that that we can't be there forever. At the same token, making the most out of it. And out of that come the moments that we actually can really shine. And you have chosen that path.
I love that. I love that so much.
Absolutely. I need to ask you, though, a few questions, though. I mean, one of the things is that there might be people who listen to that interview from different societies where the society expects you to grieve for a year. Let it be Roman Catholic Church, or let it be, I don't know what the rules are for Hindus or for other religions.
Or if you're Italian, even 10 years. Yeah, I totally
my
get
goodness.
it. That's different rules.
Well, exactly. What do you make out of that?
Yeah, nothing. So the key word that you said here is expectation. I really, and I say that very respectfully, could not care less of what others expect of me. I honestly mean it, because I am put here on this earth to make a difference, to live a happy life. And I think that we all are. It's not just me. It's not all Marie Alessi because she founded this amazing movement. No, we all have been put on this earth to make a difference. Some of us recognize it and others don't. Some of us act upon it and others don't. And this is a shout out to everyone listening to this. If you haven't found your purpose, reach out to somebody who can help you on that path. I'm happy to do so. I'm sure that Stefan will be happy to do so. And there is a billion other coaches out there, or mentors, or whoever that is in your life. Find somebody who helps you do that, because otherwise you are just an existence. And that's the exact same crap word like expectation. You know, it's not, there is no intention behind that. There is no, I don't know, like I really felt when Rob died, there was choices to be made. And Rob was the one who taught me the concept of two choices, you know. So here I was. I'm like, so many people. So this comes back to the spiritual belief. I think that Rob and I have chosen this. This was our soul contract. But even if you don't have that spiritual belief, even if you do sit there and go like, well, I haven't chosen to lose my husband, probably not, or maybe not. Let's just leave that aside. But you can still choose how you respond to it. What you do with the life that has now been presented to you, with the new path, with that complete fork in the road that you didn't expect, you know. So what do? You do have choices to make. And even if you choose to just stay in bed and you're like, well, I'm not choosing anything, that's still a choice. Correct. That's still a choice. So own it. And I know that sounds very harsh, but I really mean that with a whole lot of love and respect.
Exactly. And there is a time for that. There is a time for grief. There's a time for you going through those precious moments of feeling the sadness, of feeling the emptiness, feeling all that, because that's part and parcel of it. Let's not be silly.
Exactly it. It's part of it. And it's not the only thing. And that's where society makes a mistake, in my eyes, that they don't recognize that sadness and grief can absolutely coexist with love and happiness and all of the fun part. And I'm not saying grief is fun, not at all. It's not. I know that grief freaking hurts. It sucks. It actually, I still remember the physical pain it caused me. I was laying in bed the first night after Rob died, and I had both my boys, to my left and my right, in my arms, sobbing and crying themselves to sleep. And I was sobbing. And I remember feeling like somebody had emptied a bucket of acid in my stomach. That's how physically it hurt. It was really a physical pain that I felt. And this is where I made the decision, I have to now step up and do something. I have to create a freaking happiest life possible for the boys. And that did coexist for a really long time with the sadness, with the sobbing, even one complete mental nervous breakdown that I had in our kitchen that actually triggered me to go to therapy. And this is when I realized that that grief actually meant empowerment for me. And I never saw that connection. I never saw the power that it gave me, that I transferred it into, that I transformed into. And I took all of that and created something with it. I took that as fuel, because that is what I had learned to do. And a lot of that maybe happened at first on a subconscious, but then very quickly on a very conscious, decision-based,
But that is
the word.
Exactly. That is, you start to live truly intentionally. And you ask yourself at every moment, do I want to do that? It is rare for me nowadays to just sort of, for things to happen. I must say that it's not that I've got a meticulous plan. My plan constantly changes. But today we needed to do some shopping, and so I took my youngest. We drove to another town, sorted the things out, had a good long talk about things. So spent intentionally some time together, and then he said, "Look, why don't you come with me? I always go to a certain spot there. I throw an axe. I was recently away, so come on, Dad, we throw an axe." And I said, "Cool." Good. I was in the past, I was knife thrower. So I've never thrown an axe. Come on, let's do it. And we had a ball of a time. Now, when he said, "Come on, let's go," I was so not in the mood. But I made an active choice there. Yes, my body was tired. Yes, I had so many other things that I could have done.
Yeah.
But I made that choice.
I love it.
No, I want to spend that time intentionally with my boy. And that is a new memory. That is a new memory that the two of us are creating. And that is happiness. That is intentional living.
I love it. Yeah.
And we have good choices. Every single day. We can, every single minute, every single second. Yeah. So therefore, it is what we do that defines us. That is what I did there. I think can be best described as integrity, because it is I wanted to do the right thing. And the right integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching. In this case, he was watching, so maybe it doesn't completely work. But you know what I mean, guys. You have got choices, and if your body still needs to grieve in that passive role, then that's fine. That's fine. And
I love that so much that you say that, because I always say people don't need support in the grieving; they need support in the healing. Because the sadness happens anyway. They don't need help with the sadness. It happens. It's there. But they do need help with the healing, with the happiness part. And that's why I have dedicated my life to showing people how to do that. I just freaking love it. It gives me so much joy, and it's just the upward spiral again.
Indeed. And there is power in a movement, power in surrounding yourself with people who can focus on similar things that you want to focus upon. Go back in time to the victim mentality that your family modeled for you. You had surrounded yourself not by choice, but by nature.
I was surrounded by, absolutely.
Exactly. So, and it's so much harder in such an environment to change and implement change, compared with if you actively choose a different team to surround you, a team of people who have been in maybe the same darkness as you, but who have gone now out the other end and can teach you ways, can share their stories, and you can share without guilt, shame, or any kind of opinionated answer. You can share your story, however you experienced it. And that is the other thing. It's so difficult, because if you, let's say we both go to a party and we go to the house, and I go to the front entrance, you go to the back entrance, and I go in and I see this beautiful couple there who are making out, lovingly dancing. Nothing.
That would have been Rob and I, absolutely.
I would say this party is absolutely gorgeous. What a lovely party. And you come in the front entrance, and there are two guys drunk who are fighting each other, and you think, wow, what a shit party that was. It was the same party. But you saw different things. And maybe by you sharing your journey, by speaking out openly, you share your side of the story, and someone else can share maybe a different part of a story. And suddenly you might get another glimpse of a way of looking at things that you had not considered. And that is the moment when you start growing. That is the moment when you start actually working through things. And maybe coming to perspective. Isn't it? Exactly.
Absolutely.
But you need to do that. You can't just lie on the couch. Nothing will shift.
And sometimes
there.
you just need somebody who's got the outside perspective to show you that and point it out. And, you would be familiar with that, Stefan, family constellation. You've heard of that?
Please teach us.
It's a really beautiful way, as in looking at your family dynamic, and you can play it with people who volunteer and step in for people who represent family members. But you can also literally play it with cups. It's literally just to look at the dynamic, who's close to who. And anybody who hasn't heard of it, please Google it. Family constellation, really fascinating. And what it teaches us is that we are all in a system together, and to be taken out of the system or actively leave that system would actually threaten your survival. Going back to cave time, Absolutely. You had to be part of the pack to survive. And that, when you look at it as being in a family of victimhood, to leave that, it threatens your survival. So you stay in that behavior. If it's healthy for you or not, it's a different thing. And now I'm actually taught in family constellation. I love facilitating it. And now I'm using it to show people their family before and after their loved one's passing, and how it affects the family dynamic when you take that one person out of it. And then all of a sudden people look at each other that might not have seen each other before, or not actively look. Do you know what I mean? It is incredible. I absolutely love working with that, because it always brings you back to, you want to stay part of the family. It threatens your survival if somebody leaves the pack. So it's really fascinating work to look at that. So
the other thing, of course, that we need to acknowledge is that for you to try to move on might be a very logical and good thing to do, but if maybe someone else, for example, I'm making it up now, let's say your father has passed away, your mother is completely lost and develops this codependency, or wants to have this codependency with you, where you both
sounds very familiar. Go on. Sorry.
So I didn't try to be so obvious, but therefore, but it is, it is exactly that. Sometimes grief is giving someone secondary gains, giving them a purpose in life. Now they can be someone, they can suffer, they can, and maybe with that suffering, gain attention, love,
absolutely,
maybe monetary things.
All of the above.
Exactly. And that is so hard. It is sometimes it's important to recognize that there are different motivators happening in different parts of your family, and other people around you that are affected. So,
and this is also like with no judgment, that it's just how we are hardwired. We need attention. We need We need the recognition of our emotions. So sometimes this is the only way how we have learned to portray that. And that's what I'm saying. It's not judgment. It's just how we act, how we are brought up from our society. Other societies bring up their children by celebrating a loved one's passing, by celebrating their life rather than, the fact that they have passed. So
that's right. Exactly. The Day of the Dead, as an example in
absolutely.
Mexico.
So beautiful.
Exactly. So no, it is. It's beautiful. We have choices, and we have got a life to live, and it's a privilege for us to live that life. And I think if there's a good reason for you guys out there who are tuning in today for that interview, there's a good reason that you're listening in, and maybe it is just that you actually need to hear those words. That the past does not equal the future. You have grieved in your own way so long until now. The question is, how can it continue? How can you find meaning in that, in the next day, week, month? Is there a way forward that you can maybe do living amends, that you can maybe live a life so that others don't have to suffer? I mean, you're doing that by focusing on happiness and fulfillment after a loss. There are many examples. For example, in the UK, there are 3 dads who have lost their teenage daughters to suicide. So these 3 dads, as they are known, are fundraisers. They are walking the length of the UK and raising money and doing things like that. And they found purpose in that. I've got a friend, a person who was on my show, who has done the same thing with the United States. And he went one step bigger. He doesn't walk. So he actually did a big bus. And a tour bus. He bought a tour bus. He has got the financial means, and he is on the tour through the United States.
So Jeff Johnson?
Yes.
I know him. I've interviewed him twice in my movement. I love him. He is so incredible. Hey, Jeff, because you're watching this. Amazing. Yeah, he's actually coming back for a 3rd interview to share what has happened on a tour. He's incredible.
There you go.
Absolutely incredible.
There you go.
Yeah.
These are examples of
living undeterred.
Living undeterred. Exactly. That is his motto. I didn't want to bring him in with we have not talked about that. But yes, you're right. These are examples of people who have been in the deepest, darkest inner hell. And who said, now enough is enough.
Fuel. Yeah,
isn't it? And that is what is waiting for you if you're willing to harness that power. And you have no idea where that power can drive you to. It can drive you to self-destruction. Yes, absolutely. If you're just having a vodka bottle in your hand, man, I've been there. Okay, I've been there. I drank that bottle and then opened the next one. We're talking liter bottles of vodka. It might serve a purpose right now, but there might be other ways how you can live your life. The bottle, drink it out, finish it. Come on, you might as well. But tomorrow morning, hopefully, you just remember that little bit. And Stefan and Marie sort of said, okay, maybe there's another way. What can you do to actually leave a legacy? Hey?
Scrap the maybe. There is.
Okay, touche. Again, I try to be diplomatic. I don't try to tell people what it is.
Diplomatic has been buried in the past. No, it's not needed anymore.
Here's an Austrian and a German. So you need to do that. No, you don't need to do shit. You can wallow in your pity party another year at 5. That's cool.
Sure.
We have done that.
Yeah.
It wasn't a nice time.
Honestly, like with all jokes aside, Stefan, I think it is really important. People do need to find their own time when they're ready. Like I have so many people that come into my group and they say to me, I've been sitting on the sidelines for like 2-3 years before I actually participated, but just being there. And that comes back to who do you surround yourself
Correct.
with? You know, the people that support you, that surround you, it really does have an effect on you. So find yourself a tribe. It doesn't matter if that's mine or ours or anybody else's, but find yourself a tribe who supports you in the healing, not in the wallowing. And
Exactly.
then you'll know when you're actually ready to act upon it. But start with the tribe that supports you. Yeah.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Marie, there are no doubt people will say, wow, okay, she really got her shit together. Where can people find you? Where can they go to actually hear more about you? Bring it on.
I'm going to give it a shortcut, and that's mariealessi.com. So it's just first name, last name.com. It's my website, and you have all the links to my podcast, my interviews. Our podcast will be there as well if you send me the link, Stefan.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, my books, my movement, you can just book a chat with me. Just start with that. If you don't know where to start, I do like brief conversations with people where I just send them on the path that works for them. That might be my movement, that might be just being in a group, that might be something completely different. I've started a resource corner in my movement as well, where I can, you know, so there's so much available. And sometimes the hardest part is just to do that first step, the reaching out. That is so challenging for everyone. So book a chat. I'm going to be so lovely and gentle with you, I promise. And just to listen, to have somebody who listens, who actually has walked a path is a really good first step.
Beautiful. And guys, look down there into the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast, because you've got indeed there are all the links. And down there, there will be also that little bell and the little subscribe button there. Hit it so that you actually see all the other beautiful interviews that are coming onto my show. Marie, tonight you are actually you left the number 3. You are actually 303. So there you go.
I love it. 3 is my number.
There you go. There you go. It was all meant to be in that sequence.
Yes.
Exactly.
Love it.
And I've focused in the past with other wonderful people on grief and their journeys. And there are the resources out there. So use them and grow with them, and let us plant the seed, and let us tell you that there is hope, there is help, and the past does not equal the future. Okay, you don't know what your future yet brings, but if you follow some of the advices, and if you follow maybe some of the people who are coming across your path, you might find yourself soon in such a beautiful new world that you can't imagine it yet, but it is waiting for you. I can assure you that.
Oh, I love that. I love it, Stefan.
Marie, thank you so much for coming onto my show. This was a really, really good and very important topic to discuss. And yeah, please.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I love when conversations like that happen. They are so important. Thank you.
You guys out there, look after yourself.
Bye for now.
Dream on, dream on, dream